session than a presentation. And I start with this disclaimer that this is my vision. I haven't vetted with everyone yet, but that's the purpose of this session. So vision for the future, what are we thinking? You know, we have 1 year ahead of us, and we know what we need to complete this year. But also during this year, we need to think about the future and what do we construct in terms of making this a durable resource. And there's a lot of uncertainties in the way, but I'll go about some things that I think from what I heard earlier in the meeting today and from what we planned a long time ago when we proposed for this effort, we would do. So I put the slides just to show that there are stakeholders on both sides here. The stakeholders of the data producers, repositories, the data users, and so on, who might not be as passionate about the metadata specifications, the ingestion, and the data mat, and so on. But there's also, on data science, as we've seen these 3 projects today, and there are many others out there, a lot of people who are very involved in suggesting what they already did to be reused, to be reconciled, to be replacing other parts of bioCADDIE, and I think that's all fair game. And the reason people are so passionate is because they've been working on this area for a long time, and suddenly, because of the process, there had to be one award for this particular initiative, but that award tried to the extent possible to encompass all the other ones who were also very interested in this effort. So this is to say that, like I said in the other slide, our path ahead is dependent on a variety of factors. Our goal is to make a difference in the way data are shared. We cannot forget what's the end point, because if we do that, then we get lost into the details, and we get into my standard is better than your standard, and it's better than someone else's, and so on. That's what we don't want to do. We want to make more data shared to advance discoveries. So, like I said, this afternoon we would put a couple of thoughts forward for discussion. So this is the slide that I presented in the last BD2K meeting. And then I said pre-curated data, get metadata, become curated, and then are analyzed and are pre-processed. And the software tools are existing for all this steps. Remember? This is hosted in the cloud, a cluster or server, and so on. Then I also mentioned there are the protected health information. I challenge anyone to have more acronyms than Harold's presentation, but I'll try very hard, and here with PHI. So protected health information, as you know, requires HIPAA environments. And, but it's the same thing. You know, you need to annotate, you need to curate, and so on. And what I presented there is sometimes the join of this data creates yet another data set, right? Like Jeff was saying, well, there is the original data set, there is the derivative of that, and so on. So this is my mouse model. I don't know if you remember the mouse model for data science. This is my presentation here. Because once you join, you create a new data set, and that data set too can be curated and pre-processed and served as analysis for another data set. And then there are the publications, right, which we're more familiar with, and so far have not dealt with the issue of data as much. I mean, slowly Triad and other things have come up. But as we are very interested in the reproducibility of journals, we should and are very interested in the reproducibility of data. And why this is important? Well, because some data are derived from others using a certain software. So what I wanted to emphasize here, and I de-emphasized at the BD2K meeting, is unless you index the software that went with that data, you won't the provenance of that data won't be very well characterized, right? Because you don't know how you got to it, and you never know, other than direct from the instrument, that's the raw data. Everything else is processed data, one way or another. So retaining that software that did that, or retaining, what we had, when we wrote this proposal, we thought was retaining the full virtual machine, so you would have the full environment that processed that data and turned into something else, would be very important. Subsequently, Dockers appeared. They are more lightweight, they're more manageable, and so on, but it's the same principle. They encapsulate the system elements that worked on the data to make that data something else, and that something else is what ends up deposited in one of those repositories. So in my overall view, we are incomplete until we index the software and the systems that software participates in order to create new data. Meaning, reproducibility will only be achieved if we can, 5 years from now, when the version of the operating system and this software and so on still exists, so we could reproduce it. Very high order, very much beyond what we had in terms of data indexing only. But as we mentioned before, it's digital objects indexing, and they all come together. Also, I retrieved this illustration from the past. I added a couple of icons on top, but this is how we originally thought of this. Data has a front end, a place there you can see it and operate on it, index it. That was what we call the data shop, indexing, linking to articles, using ontology-based tools. And a showcase as well, where you actually get that data exposed. You see, I want that, I don't want that, and so on. That's better for me. And that we have instantiated now the data map in one possible storefront. And then the data market, which is all the more complicated environment in which we create a market for those data. So we were discussing, all publications had a very well-defined market when PubMed came in and organized it. Because the journals existed, the indexes for those journals also existed. Some were commercial, so the task there was to replace them and make it a public resource. But in our case, we are creating the market as we develop the tools to find it and to operate it. So it's a little bit more involved and less certain, also because of who is doing this initiative. So not being NIH itself, of course NIH being part of it, but not being it only creates some, I would say, hesitation on the parts of repositories, because, well, why would I index and prepare all my data into this if it's not going to last after a couple of years? And I can see that hesitation. I would have it myself, or running a repository myself. I would have that particular question. So the way I see it, the bioCADDIE is a data shop and showcase. We have the repositories coming with their products. We organize them. We display them beautifully for customers to buy them or not. And this is an illustration of how we can consider it. But of the market, it's more interesting. It becomes more interesting. Like I was describing at lunch, we don't need to be the only store. There could be several others. If we create that market, if that market starts to exist, someone else succeeds. Let's say the equivalent, Google is now the big thing, but someone started indexing earlier, and it was another search engine that, started and had others take up on it. That's a very good thing. It created something that didn't exist. And I put the research coin here as the currency for this market because it's very unclear. Citations and so on, I personally think they are part of the strategy, but they're not the full strategy. They can't be. They take too long, and they, in order for them to become part of promotions processes in academics or something that industry views as important to them, it will take too many years. I think we have to have a research coin that means something for the people now rather than 5 years from now. How to make that market, how to create that exchange, how to incentivize people to do that is also a very tricky thing. But the research coin, the way I put it there as a possibility is because I've been very much into blockchain lately and thinking about decentralization and how things, start having a life of their own as long as the infrastructure is designed to support it, right? So the analogy here is we need to create this market. I think all of other stakeholders in different aspects can contribute to creating it. And what happens later will be less regulated. If we insert this idea that there will be this exchange, and maybe this is common, maybe it's beyond that, then we have something to operate with. Then it may have a life of its own. It might be followed by some other initiatives. Because what I'm trying to say is that the current funding mechanism is important, but it can't be forever that way. It has to be something that does, generate the need, the demand, and the continuous feeding of this market. Otherwise, it will be just a one-way money direction. And that's what makes many, many projects a one-off thing, that it really doesn't build up to a larger market, to a larger initiative. I have publicly said several times that I think this needs to be taken up by the NIH, institutionally taken up. Go for it. Fix it. If you don't like it, replace it. But take it as something that, unless there is strong support towards making this happen, it will be a one-off thing that ends with whatever program it is. So that's my few slides. I also want to have some, because we all like programming, I have some if-then statements. So our journey is like that. If you want to go fast, then go alone. If you want to go far, then go together. You probably know this proverb from Africa, right? I think it fits completely with us. We went very fast. We are 1.5 years into our start. We try to engage as many people as possible. But again, in order to go far, we need to be catalysts of all this interest that there is out there. And that's where we thought of the pilot projects being very important, because they bring ideas that we haven't thought of. They can experiment with it, and if they do work, we incorporate, and we have alternatives for the same thing. We have replacements, and so on. So that's something that I want to continue to sponsor for this third year of the project, and then to think about this as I mentioned in our other workshop. Think of it of how important it it would be if you were there the day somebody decided PubMed would exist and had this vision that every biomedical researcher will be using it directly or through another interface to an API with another interface. If you were there in that meeting, that would be wonderful, and you helped create it. So it's the same thing here. You are in the middle of this. You, like my colleague from Mayo Clinic, not Harold, but Chris said it's a terrible acronym. I'm all for changing even the acronym. What I think is important is this data market didn't exist before. We need to create it. It won't be free forever. Data won't be, as much as we love free stuff. It's not going to be just as journals weren't. And we have to start thinking about this with our Bitcoin equivalent. So Vivien, I leave it to you to make it happen. Yeah. So would you come and say a few things, or many things?
I'm not exactly sure what you want to hear for this. Where can I start? I'd rather this be a discussion with folks, so maybe just a few words sort of from an NIH perspective. So what's written in the program is BD2K vision for bioCADDIE. I will get a riff on what we just did here. To go far, then you need to go together, right? This applies to NIH as well. Most of you know NIH is made up of 27 individual individual ICs. And I battle those cylinders of excellence every day because of that last step. Because if you want to go far, we have to go together. So the project that I think Ron was talking about this morning is this issue of these reference data sets, which is the one we're working on at the moment. That's going across a whole lot of different ICs. And it's worse than herding feral cats right now, is probably a good example. But it's worth the effort because it makes us talk to each one of the different ICs, and they have a different view of the picture. So we're trying to do it from the inside as well, which means we can't go fast. And NIH tends to be glacially fast and transparently opaque. So given that context, we're going slow. But the goal there is to get all of the institutes together to work together so that we can actually create these data markets. Because I think the issue with NIH is that the currency of data is still not there. And that creates a whole lot of issues. So we are trying from the inside to do that. I think that's one point. The second one is we've identified that, I think you were pointing it out, this sustainability, right? If we keep doing the same old things using the same old methods, we often can't sustain some of these efforts. So one of the things I've been looking at is which bits of infrastructure should NIH do themselves? And an example there that I've been looking at is for these exceptionally large data sets that people want to use in these commercial clouds, no researcher can afford to store them themselves. It's going to suck into their grant and they just can't do it. So what I see is a lot of researchers coming to us and saying, we want to support this. How do we do that? They can't because it's money coming out of their grant's not going to do it. So what we're looking at is what does NIH really need to do from an infrastructure point of view that it's its best use of its money? Because then when you have, in this case, the data, then you can do what you like on the top of it, and that can be initiated through grants and other mechanisms. So the issue there is, which infrastructure should we support that best enables researchers to do their work? That's the question mark that we're also having internally. The third one is you mentioned the data market, right? So this issue of a transactional happening so that people can do things with data. That's also, I think, what we're trying to do with the commons. It's essentially a marketplace as well, where you've got data and tools up there. So this morning we had a conversation during Jeff's and Mark's talk, right? We were talking about what's the best way to connect. I think we have very similar ideas about what that market is and the concept of the market and research coins. And I think we need to have more discussions about what those are to figure out what it is we need to do and then fit mechanisms to that, not the other way around, which is sometimes what we do. And I think you've all experienced when you set up a mechanism that doesn't work, you do that first and don't actually think about the science. So I think that would be I would say that this would be a good discussion to have to figure out some of those pieces. So those are the three things that just sort of struck me as I was listening to this morning. I guess the last one is what you said, which is the pilots. You've got one set of things that you're looking at, but you're looking at a collection of different things. You talked about, count everything. Chris's work, I think when you're looking at different ways of handling that and preserving data, I think are really valuable, and they're giving us glimpses into what this is. I think from that collectively, we can think about what we need to do. I think I'm going to leave it there. I think these are just my observations from this morning, and what I'd like to do is just, if you're okay with that, this is a time to have a conversation. Great, but this is a room where you're staring at me and I'm staring at you. What's the best way to have a conversation? We break now and have a coffee and have a conversation, or do you want to do it up here? What's the best way to have that? And do you have questions for us or Lucila? How would you like to handle it, Lucila?
Circulate this or send it out with the microphone.
Yeah, sure.
Just to know what's in people's minds regarding, and I heard a bunch of good questions, and what's next, what to be prepared for. And I think, well, first, we do some things what we set out to do, and of course, adjustments as necessary. But also, yes, if we all collectively keep thinking of what's the next best way to go forward, and again, this joint session this afternoon with the training board, centers coordinating center of the BD2K is also to put more minds thinking about the same problem. These are the ones that are thinking about that. But I think if we could do a non-recorded discussion just here about what's in people's minds regarding, what about, just come up with ideas. Again, I think current mechanisms are at the blowing, they haven't blown already. You can fit more into the ball, right? You can put more air into this ball at one point. It will blow. And that is repository, right? How these repositories are non-paid. And how then we need to take something that indexes this non-paid repository that one day may become unsustainable itself.
I mean, one of the things we're trying to do is collect the scientific ideas that people have about what you want to do without the context of mechanism at the moment. We realize that funding is needed to do these projects, but I think what we want to understand is what is it you want to do rather than tell us what you want to do in the context of the mechanism you think it should be. I think if we can think that way, that's a good way for us to do it, because some of the things that I've seen, not just from here, but other things within the Commons, just don't fit in the usual mechanisms. And we may have to shoehorn a few things, but I think it's also good to think about where do we need to change, because of the thing, these don't fall into often just standard research projects. That and also just the long-term sustainability.
So, again, I think it's just to ask the question differently.
When you walk over here, we just...
So I just said that maybe ask the question differently. That say, for example, that when you think the index repositories is an unsustainable effort, maybe that is the area we should focus on. Like how to develop things to make this process more efficient and sustainable. So what are the main points? What are the pain points for the bioCADDIE right now to move forward? That can be a good information to know as well.
So, yeah, from my standpoint, uncertainty is a big barrier towards thinking boldly and thinking, very innovatively about things, because if you invest a whole lot of time and you don't know what the next step is, it's very difficult. And what I mean about uncertainty is there a concerted understanding that regardless of who does it, who hosts it, whatever, that this is necessary right now, and that it will be not something that is the initiative of the day, and then something else comes, and then something else comes. Because I think that this not adding up is what perhaps makes us less, us in general, less effective in routing the school of fish in the same direction. And I think I see that many times in our own institution and so on. You want the flowers to, 1,000 flowers bloom, but you probably want to put them in a certain place that they bloom in the right, not completely out of context. You don't want weeds. You don't want weeds. That's true as well. And you want them to, to look good, to continue to be strong. But I think it's, having been on an administrator end of things and on a researcher end of things and so on, it's hard to put it all together. But I would like, the young minds in the audience to come up with it. Why don't you guys do that? And then maybe we would step back and say, well, yeah, you're right. We currently don't do because we're so stuck on trying to get an R1 to do this, or trying to get, going the same way that we haven't thought of it. So I'd say, I say young in spirit. I don't want to discriminate chronologically here. But come up, what is it that you think should be done in, we could direct our efforts and energy towards?
Has a question.
So I can go directly into that. So some points I'm missing in the bioCADDIE activities that I've seen so far, and especially at the meeting, is how activities tie in with what others are doing, both in the recent past, in the short-term future, and in the long range. Then a review of things like the blockchain. You mentioned it briefly, but I think that this is a potentially disruptive thing that we should at least have a very informed look at, and then let people share it and what the result of that work is. And there are other such potentially transformative things. Version control data is something about to become more mainstream. BioTorrents, Wikidata. If you look around, there are lots of such things popping up, and they would change the way we do things like bioCADDIE. And so what I would really encourage you to do is have a closer look at some of those unusual ways of doing things. And finally, eating more of your own dark fruit. Like, for instance, on every slide you have this supported by an thing, but it's just a text string. It's hidden in a slide in a non-open format in a presentation that is not public. So, lots of things to improve. And I understand you can't do everything at all, but just try. Having the same presentation in an open format and public already in a machine-readable way with the attribution. That's something not too difficult to do.
Definitely the public part of it is not real time, but it will be there, as has been everything else that we created. Machine-readable, totally get the point. It's not at this hour, but I think in terms of public, that's definitely something we want to do. This registration for this was open on the, not many takers on a Sunday, but it's recorded as well to be public. So I think that again, point well taken, that if it looks like we're trying to hide things or make it a very select group, that was totally not the intention.
No, that's also not my point. My point is really to make exemplary cases. I understand you can't do it all perfect immediately, but select a few, maybe just one presentation meeting or so that meets your own standard that you're striving for. And the point I'm making about the attribution to NIH is because at some point, someone like NIH might actually go out and harvest all those things that are happening in the community with NIH support, which would then facilitate, again, your case of being useful. But right now, this is just a text string swimming around somewhere, and we have no way of harvesting it.
Right. How you would suggest we do it, you know?
Well, not here in the next 5 minutes, but this is the kind of thing that should be discussed in forums like this, or in one of the working groups, or in other workshops, or something like that. So, yeah, just brief answers to your questions and what you could do differently.
And thanks for being the first to initiate the discussion. I think that's great.
No?
Yes.
Yes. To turn the same comment around, I think it's excellent to have this event co-located with the much larger event which is taking place here. So I think this is exactly the right direction, looking at what are other fields doing and seeing also encouraging cross-fertilization from other fields which have the same challenges.
Sort of riffing on what Henning and Daniel just said. So I think it's in, you know, DataMed is kind of a bridging point here. The way that DataMed is proceeding is by doing a lot of actually doing a fair amount of outreach and involving other players in the community, and that I think that's been important. And I think the day of the sort of single killer app at home house at NIH is kind of over. I think it's all about ecosystems now. The sort of the big players like Google and Amazon have these sort of very broad general purpose infrastructures that NIH or nobody really can replicate. So I think some thought that a bunch of us could do or contribute towards this is how to think about tying bioCADDIE kinds of work and some of the elements here to other components of the ecosystem in an ongoing way and with a kind of architectural frame.
First of all, thank you for making this an open meeting. This did come to that opportunity. I want to just give a specific example through the openness and outreach. The social scene seems to be taking over in terms of ability of people to find things, and that's one of the areas that I think could really be improved a lot, probably on all our fronts. And I know when I was preparing slides and trying to access existing materials from bioCADDIE, I just couldn't find any that I'm sure were presented, but I can't find them. So if there's ways for us to start developing common practices through other tools that we could do that already have that kind of sharing built in, we might buy us a lot of access and exchange very transparently.
Action items immediate. Get this website fixed. No, but that's easy to address at least.
A brief comment on that one. I didn't mean, because I wanted to restrict myself to 3 years long. Since you bring it up, it's not just improving the website, but it's also kind of feeding into the ecosystem. Like, if you have something, a white paper or whatever, don't just let it sit on your own website. Feed it into Zenodo, into those other places where people are actually going, that are actually indexed by other systems like Google. And that's one way of making it findable. Some people prefer to use their own tool to find, some people use Google Scholar or whatever. And you have to basically interact with as many of those services as possible to increase the likelihood of people actually finding this stuff. And that is on top of things like machine readability. You can do this even with PDFs.
CCC establishing best practices, all places for the other students, and getting that out.
One aspect of making it more social and using the social tools. So one of the bylines or taglines for GitHub is social coding. We're not just coding, managing projects, and tracking issues. So, to Daniel's comment, I saw that Daniel's already posted 5 things with the prototype issues GitHub repository. And that's great to see. We set Wara referred to it in his talk and showed the workflow for handling that kind of user feedback. Interested to hear from those who made those kinds of comments. They see that as a useful mechanism to move this forward and get social feedback and to use that to drive
I can respond to that quickly. So I like that opportunity a lot, and I think it's potentially even more effective than the classic way of running work groups. So imagine the hour or so of the teleconference that is being spent on audio communication, and where you require everybody to be roughly at the same time, to be connected at the same time. Imagine that hour could be distributed across the time schedule that everybody has, and instead of some potentially not recorded or maybe audio recorded thing, you have something that's recorded in text that is indexable immediately, like those GitHub issues. So it's much more easier. Sometimes I even stumble across things via such issues, even if I'm not subscribed to a particular thread, because I'm just looking for specific terms that are just discussed there. That's one way of discovering things, but I've never come across recordings of a telecom or so this way. And so I think maybe not entirely replace the working groups by such tools, but at least use them more often, use them more broadly would be reasonable.
What kind of infrastructure do you think has to be put in place to manage and respond to such a source? Are there good examples of projects that have done that we can learn from?
Well, there are some hit lists of GitHub projects, and so those that are followed by thousands of people or forked 1,000 times, they typically have a very good way of handling that amount of traffic. A small scale but still useful example would be Mozilla Open Science Lab. They do a lot via GitHub, and they even organize hackathons this way. So everybody who has an idea for a hackathon project, they just open an issue on that particular repo's account, and then everybody can comment on it, and people come prepared to the hackathon. Very efficient hackathons, actually. And so, yeah, I would be happy to discuss that. And I think this kind of question of how to efficiently communicate across time zones, topics, institutions, and so on is something that is valuable to discuss. May merit its own workshop or something. And there is actually going to be a course 11 workshop next week where maybe we're going to discuss similar things.
Yeah, and I would subscribe also to the idea that too many face-to-face meetings is something that no one can keep up with. So it's the same principle, and I do think it needs to be a mix of strategies, and I also think that a mix of strategies depending on the type of users. So I leave no one behind. And if some don't do as much, GitHub and other technologies, we still need their input. I am a firm believer that the biomedical community, to a large extent, is not as facile with its tools and asynchronous communication than it is with conferences, right? We still go go to conferences, to meet other people and have kind of thing. So I do think we're missing that part, and we should work on it definitely, and perhaps decrease or complement what some still believe is necessary. But I would hope not. I mean, I would hope we could do everything, not having the physical presence be such an important determinant of success.
Maybe we could talk about the data market, because that's the thing that could innovatively drive real change and be a way to think about how different things could be, maybe some of the different scenarios, just to kind of free our thinking from all the patterns and embedded habits that maybe some are tied to NIH, some tied to the biomedical community, or just lots that we're not even aware of. So blockchain is one way of thinking about it, and there's been a lot of activity recently with that. But maybe we could highlight some other aspects of what these data markets might look like.
And just to provoke your reactions and wake up some of those who are quiet. Think about the challenge that the major clinical journals in the country is against data sharing, or apparently against data sharing, because you parasites are out there to grab someone else's data and so on. So just to put this in context, and not saying there is merit into anything of that or so on, but just don't be blind to a whole community that's still very influential and still saying this kind of things without any material consequence. Other than bad consequences of someone asking me, am I a parasite? Is everything that we do kind of invalid? There's no value. And I'll say no, but ignoring it won't do us any good. We need to create value into this and, assign value to the data reusers and come up with the examples. So I would challenge the data scientists in the room to come with more examples of why sharing, of why doing it this way has made such a big difference in X that it should be self-evident.
This issue of data sharing was an issue in the 17th century with the alchemists, especially.
Well, some people seem to have come from that age.
Well, I think some of it has to do with best practices for citation. I mean, if somebody does go in, reuse some data, they need to do it in the context of giving full credit to the people who derived the data, presented it, published it, and so on, so that the citation proves back to the people who produced it, and then perhaps then see someone as being false.
Oh, it is, and let me give another example that I was just thinking when we were going through the slides, and which is why I took longer to produce my own artwork, flip art, and other things, right? Do we give enough value for those artists or not? And I was thinking, well, no, I need to cite everything where I got it from, because that's, there is a whole community of artists that depends on this, and there's a market. There should be a market. So we're in a similar situation because a whole lot of other people think, well, data, that should be free. I should be able to use it. Many of us biomedical research people or bioinformatics people thinking all data should be public and we should be able to use it because we're good and we'll analyze and we'll bring a lot of value to it. So think about that. I was thinking about the clip art and how much more painful it was to to check if there was Creative Commons once I Googled an image that I wanted and so on, and filter for that, and then put that cut and paste into my slide, and then put the attribution right here. So we're talking about the same thing. It's more painful to do something, but it's the right thing. So how do we impart on people that data perhaps shouldn't be free? There is value to it. There is, a market to be created. And this is to be controversial because I know bioinformatics folks and so on think everything should be free and the government should pay for it.
I think it's pretty clear, right? I mean, why there is this kind of perception on some people that maybe using somebody else's data is parasitic is just because, not that I don't share, right? I mean, you have the currency of computations right now, right? If the currency becomes data sets, right, then I'd be happy if my data is to use. That's not so much like the alchemists. I mean, they didn't like to share because they wanted to make gold from lead, right? So they didn't tell anybody what they did, right? Except their closest, apprentices, right? And now we have a point, we need publications of the currency, you need to make data the currency, right? Or at least an additional currency, and then the problem can kind of go away, right? Now again, it's kind of the obvious thing that we'll be discussing.
Well, there are a few alchemists in NIH, let's put it that way. And they're trying to make lead rather than gold. I agree with you. So we were saying before, and I think what Lucila was saying too, you've got to make data the currency. And at NIH, that means because publication is still the route to grants, in particular when the reviews are, is trying to get that element of data citation and data as a currency as part of that review process and sort of embedded within NIH is really important. And that's where I think the funders have to play a role strongly, because that's also going to change the ecosystem. And it's difficult because you've got to change it across so many different places. But that's the point that we're trying to do. We're trying to change those pieces. I just want to respond to something that Daniel said too. And I agree with you when you were saying about NIH may want to harvest this information to show its value to the community. That's exactly right. Anyone who's at an NIH grant should look at what's the value to the community. It's seen in a very particular way, but I think what she raises is an important one, which is if you can see how this has been used by yourselves and others. For example, if you get indexed by Google, by others who put stuff in GitHub, etc., it has that value that you're part of that community as well, and you're seen as part of that. And what you're looking at is essentially larger numbers of people going in this direction, and you're part of that, I think is a really useful thing to do as well. I think everyone wants a coffee.
Preprint services. Yep. And I just think that these work streams here need to interface strongly with that.
Good point. I agree with you, Tim, on that. But there's also, not everyone agrees with preprint service.
Like the editors of some sort.
I'm not going to say that. She said that. I agree, but I think that's something that's part of that change.
Yeah, and again, we have to think about the market as a whole, right?
So, Heidi's point, I think, is a good one too, which is the data market, right? Which is, how does that look? Because from the things that I saw today, it fits very much with some of the concepts that I had with the market as well. So that would be a really good introduction to have further conversation. That sounds like a really good line.
And Vivien is paying, by the way, for the wine.
Non-alcoholic.